nobody really believes in her body, her choice. Don't get me wrong, people believe in abortion, but that slogan, you've seen it on a million signs and 10 million social media posts. Even the pro-abortionist doesn't really believe in it when the rubber hits the road, and that's exactly what we're going to look at. Not some bizarre application to another issue, but the actual question at hand, quote-unquote reproductive rights, seeing just what her body, her choice actually means, taking it to its natural conclusion and finding out just how little support it really has, even among, especially among, those who claim to believe in it most. Now, let me go ahead and get out of the way what this is not. Specifically, this is not the argument that since almost everyone who said her body, her choice, really just in a flash switched over to you don't have any right not to get an injection from the government when the pandemic rolled around, that they've proven themselves not to actually believe in bodily autonomy. Don't get me wrong, that's a good argument that if you think you can revoke personal freedom and mandate inoculation because it might save a life, then you absolutely have picked a pro-life ethic over a pro-choice one. But it's not the argument we're going to be doing here. This is the case that, on its own terms, in the very same situation, the question of mother and child, the supporters of abortion don't really believe in her body, her choice. Just about every abortion argument, outside of the explicitly eugenic ones, as opposed to just the implicitly eugenic ones, rests on a two-legged stool. One leg says, the baby isn't human. The second leg says, a woman has a right to her body. The standard abortion tactic is to, if one of those is disproved, quickly switch over to the other one before anyone can find out what you're doing. If they say the baby is a clump of cells, and then you prove that the baby is human, then they'll really quickly jump back to, but it's still a woman's choice. If you debunk that argument, then they'll jump back to, but the baby isn't human, even if you've already debunked that. This argument, that no one really believes in her body, her choice, is about taking the her body, her choice leg and cutting it off once and for all, never to be returned to. The pitch is straightforward. Her body, her choice says simply, a woman cannot be forced to do something with her body that she doesn't want to. Now, abortionists love using bizarre, contrived metaphors to try to make a case for this. Maybe you've heard about the one about you're getting in a car crash, but then you have some special blood type, and so you wake up in a hospital and you're hooked up to a famous violinist on another bed and you can't move the IV tube or he'll die. That kind of just off-the-wall, basically nonsensical stuff. I, here, am going to also use a metaphor. Actually, it's really more of a case example, with one notable difference. Unlike that pro-abortion metaphor, hypothetical, whatever you want to call it, one that has never happened in the history of ever, my example is one that takes place every single day. Situation. A woman gives birth to a healthy child, she's checked out by the doctor, and she takes her child home. Happens every day. Now, she walks in the door with her child. She sets him or her in the crib, and then she considers and makes a decision. She makes a woman's choice. She decides that she no longer wants to use her body to sustain the life of her baby. She decides the baby doesn't have any right to her body, and since it is her body and her choice, she doesn't really care to feel her child. She doesn't want to, and she doesn't have to. So she leaves the child in the cradle, does whatever her heart desires, and the newborn goes without food until the inevitable happens. Now we get to the real question. Was that okay? Was that actually a powerful moment of feminism and autonomy? Was that her body, her choice? The only possible answer from a her body, her choice supporter is, yes, this is fine. All that she did was make her own choice about her own body. She went off to do whatever she wanted to do with her own bodily autonomy, not owing anything to anyone, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's empowerment. That's her right. Right? What would you say otherwise? That you would force her to use her body to care for that child against her will? That's not her body, her choice. And it isn't. If you would say in this situation that a woman would be charged with child neglect, even neglectful homicide, then you are affirming undeniably that the government has a right to tell a mother to take care of her child. Or, more accurately, you are affirming that a mother has a responsibility to take care of her child. And that, right there, the universal acknowledgement of parental responsibility, is where her body, her choice dies. I think proponents of abortion are wildly wrong. Some of them, in full consciousness of what they're doing with abortion, descend into just monstrosity. Yet I know of almost none. Sadly, as much as I say no one here, the true number is probably not actually zero, but almost none who would actively affirm that for the sake of a woman's bodily autonomy, there is absolutely nothing wrong with leaving a child to starve. Now, you might try to push back on this, try to get out of this scenario, say something like, well, she doesn't have to use her body, she can use formula, or she can drop the baby off at a fire department. And these, in and of themselves, don't count as a point, because you're still forcing a woman to do something with her body, even if it's just travel and purchases. But let's grant that. Let's narrow the scope of her body, her choice, to only specifically use of one's body to sustain another human being. Say it only applies there. Be very generous to the pro-abortion position. Now, we'll make the situation a little bit more contrived, about 10 miles shy of the contrivance of getting your blood hooked up to a violinist, but a little more contrived, and add one additional factor. Say there's a snowstorm. Nothing unheard of, but the mother and her kid get snowed in. They live in a rural area, say up in Minnesota, and the roads aren't going to be plowed for a couple of days, so it's just her and the baby. And there's no formula in the fridge. Now that all the little excuses are out of the way, the question is right there in front of you. Does that mother have an obligation to use her body to preserve the life of her child? Yes, obviously. Every decent person thinks this. Maybe I'm putting too much faith in the moral decency of the pro-abortion crowd, but I sincerely don't think that you, a pro-abortionist, believe that child neglect should be legalized and there should be nothing wrong with leaving the child to starve because it's her body, her choice, and she doesn't have to feed him. You don't believe in her body, her choice. You believe, rather, and of course you do, in basic human morality, that a mother is obligated to care for her child. That if she can, by no extraordinary means, not like, oh, she has to run into a burning building, though we would certainly consider that heroic, but if she, by normal means of her body, can preserve that child, then she is expected to. And if she is expected to do so after the child is born, she is expected to do so before. There is no fundamental biological difference in the child a day before birth compared to a day after birth, besides the fact that he or she is a day older. There's no bestowal of humanity that came in that one day. It's actually a more active role required to keep the child alive after birth than before. Previously, the child was sustained autonomously as the mother went about her day. Now he or she needs to be cared for specifically, yet we still affirm that he or she must be cared for, that the baby cannot be left to die. The child isn't a violinist, and he's not a stranger. He's your child. And if almost anything should be basic to humanity, it's that you have a responsibility to your child. You take care of them a day after birth. You take care of them 2 years after birth. Again, I don't see the her body, her choice crowd, or just the argument in general, justifying deciding that you've had enough of the 2-year-old and walking out of the house to let him fend for himself. You take care of them in those situations. You take care of them in the womb as well. The responsibility is the same because the child is the same. It was the same child a day after birth, the day before birth. The same child 2 years later. The same child 9 months earlier. The same child 70 years later. It's still your child, and the responsibility remains the same. Do you want to know how else we know that this is what we believe as a society? That a parent has to care for the child? Parent, not just mother. Because of what we do with men. Men obviously cannot get pregnant. It's 2025, and the only thing that has changed about that permanent fact is that some people are pretending it doesn't exist. Men's bodies are not physically built to sustain a child. So what does society do with men exactly? Child support. You might shrug at that and think it's not significant, but stop and think for a minute about what exactly child support is. A man sleeps with a woman. Maybe after that he decides he wants nothing to do with that relationship. He finds out she's pregnant. He doesn't want the kid. He doesn't want the kid to live. He wants her to get an abortion. He takes no interest in the situation whatsoever. But once that child is born, this woman keeps the child. Society claims the right to take that man and say, all right, bucko, for the next 18 years, you are going to be working for this child. 18 years! Is that his body, his choice? If he decided from the very first day after sleeping with the mother that he wants nothing to do with this kid, is that his body and his choice to leave the situation? No, it's not. He has to work for that kid. The government can force him to do it. If he refuses to, he can be hauled off to prison. He is, to some extent, something of almost a slave to that child, made to work even if he doesn't want to, made to pay even if he wants to refuse it, for nearly 2 decades. Well, if he didn't want that, he shouldn't have slept with her, you might say. All right then, I suppose we agree that choosing to make a child to become a parent makes you responsible for that child that you choose to make. Because I want to be totally clear, all of that, those 2 decades of government forced work that a man has to do for a kid, whether he wants to or not, whether he wants the kid or not, I don't have a problem with that. I think that's right, all things considered. Now, this is notwithstanding there are some flaws in the actual administration of child support, things like paternity tests and the like. But the fundamental principle, there is nothing wrong with saying to that man, that is your child and you need to provide for them. That's what a man should do. And there is nothing wrong with saying to a woman, that is your child and you need to provide for him or her. You might chafe at that, but you know it's true. You're not legalizing child neglect, and that in itself shows that you believe in that responsibility. You don't believe in her body, her choice, nor do you believe in his body, his choice. You believe in parental responsibility for a child. That's the right thing to believe in. Next time someone says, her body, her choice, just ask them that, the short version. Do you think a woman can let her child starve, or is she obligated to use her body for that child? If they, of course, say they oppose child neglect, then it's not her body, her choice. It's parental obligation to provide for a child. If they say they think child neglect should be legal, then I suppose you know exactly what and who you're dealing with. It shouldn't be a surprise that someone who thinks you should be allowed to kill a child thinks you should be allowed to kill a child, but I don't think we're all that far gone. Show them that they believe that a parent should care for their child, and then connect the dots for them. Is this pro-life? Sure. But how about just this? Pro-parents loving their children and taking the responsibility to care for them. That's what our society, our entire species, is built on. This responsibility is the foundation of our society, and this responsibility is one that is born of love. When the choice is there to take care of your child, whether they're newborn or still on the way, I hope that love wins.